against this twisted, smiling demon. I'll add I'm gonna have some tea. This is my critique of Attack on Titan's second chapter, That Day. If you'd like to see the previous video, you can click on the link in the description. We open on crucial information being given. Humanity beyond the walls had perished to the Titans over a century ago. The walls were created purposely by this kingdom's predecessors to protect them from these giants. These facts may have seemed self-evident, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing to clarify. I think the more interesting and natural next question is how they managed to construct it under the pressure of these things. The speaker among the soldiers reminds us that the wall failed them 5 years ago. In a flashback, we return to Eren and his friends, shocked by witnessing a gigantic titan peeking over the wall. They comment on the ridiculous height of it, above 50 feet. At this point, I would have found this to be milking the imagery a bit, since this is the third time this particular scene is being recreated, and we're only on the opening of the second chapter. However, this time, when the ending scene from the previous chapter is again replicated by having the Titan blast a hole in the wall, I believe it's justified by giving us the perspective of the other side, as we see debris fly into the town, destroying several houses. The Titan vanishes behind the wall, peculiar behavior considering the smaller Titan's actions later in this chapter. The trio are now realizing the horrific implications of this act. The citizens begin to flee, but before Mikasa and Armin can join them, Eren starts dashing the other way, as he is hoping for his mother's safety from the blasted rubble. Mikasa catches up with him, and Armin is left stunned for a moment. He manages to work himself up to a yell, screaming that the town will be overcome by Titans. We are still getting to know these characters, but I can still compliment that their actions in this scene are consistent with the little that was established about them in the previous chapter. Eren's act-first attitude, Mikasa's protectiveness, and Armin's passiveness, and how they are applied under given scenarios. The next series of pages play with the character's anxiety really well. Eren is attempting to assure himself that everything is okay, while he also has to force himself to turn away from a man crushed under a rock with his family by his side, which also serves the reader as a bad omen. The worst can almost be presumed when we find the house already collapsed in this panel with the mother nowhere near in sight. They do manage to find her underneath it. We could see this as an alleviating moment. There is reason to believe they can pull her out and make their escape. However, as Eren and Mikasa are lifting the debris, they notice Titans strolling down the street. Tension builds again. To add further stress to the situation, his mother's legs are crushed and she'll be unable to run even if she gets out. His mother's cries for them to flee fall on deaf ears. The circumstances are even more dire now that a Titan has taken notice of them. Suddenly, Hannes arrives, ready to fight the Titan. What could also be seen as another alleviating moment. We have a hero sweep in at the last minute. On the surface, he assures them he'll slaughter the monster, fulfilling his debt to them, and they'll leave altogether. However, he is actually attempting to clear his mind of self-doubt, leading up to him coming face to face with the Titan. I think this enveloping darkness pushes a sense of solitude, visualizing the idea that he really only has himself to rely on against this twisted, smiling demon. I'll add anxiousness to that as he's going back and forth on his decision. Ultimately, Hannes can't find the courage and decides to sheathe his sword, grab the kids, and retreats. Eren's mother thanks him for it, begging the kids to live. We get a flashback of what was likely an average day of the family sitting together. The mother acts out a delirium by calling out to them before covering her mouth. I really thought everything they did with her character was great for how little we got to spend with her. Beginning with her nagging at Eren, obviously she doesn't want him to get himself killed. Her protectiveness for her child could be seen as tested in this chapter though. In front of the children, she puts on this rational veneer of in a self-sacrificing effort to get them to leave, because of course she would have wanted to be with her kids, but she had the emotional strength to be resigned to her gruesome fate. Like Eren, we are forced to witness his mother helplessly lifted by the Titan, having her spine crushed and then devoured by it. Eren starts swinging at Hannes, blaming him for his mother's death. Hannes tearfully swears that neither of them would have been able to save her. It would have been tragic enough to have Eren find his mother already eaten or crushed to death. Yet having added these moments where there might be a chance that things could have turned out for the better just to be carried off helplessly comes across as so cruel. It is my belief this will cause painful emotional trauma for Eren, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Hannes puts the blame on his lack of bravery, which, sure, that is a part of it. I wouldn't be expecting him to be rational in a terrifying life or death situation as was portrayed. Nevertheless, I think it's worth pointing out Hannes actually made the correct decision. There's very little to believe that he would have been successful in slaying that Titan. He spent the day drunk, chatting with his colleagues, and we can presume he probably didn't spend any of that time training. Even experienced soldiers don't fare that well either. Instead, I thought it would have been a great way to wrap a bow on their conversation from Chapter 1. Hannes realizing that Eren was correct in his scathing appraisal of the garrison, not to imply that it should have been done bluntly by having Hannes parrot Eren's points. This could have been a subtle acknowledgement, perhaps expressing regret with how he spent his days, or wishing that he hadn't been dismissive, or even have them stare at each other, awkwardly quiet, basically a silent admission. But speaking of being blunt, I wanted to bring up coincidence and how it was used. Firstly, in Chapter 1, I regret not expanding on how contrived it was that 3 events in a row just happened to challenge Eren's perspective. He just so happens to get into an argument with a family friend, witness the humiliation of the Survey Corps, and get lambasted by his mother all in the same day. Then following up with the wall being destroyed, which vindicates his position. How convenient for the themes being expressed. When he feels so strongly about his beliefs and his friends and family are aware of this, it's hard to imagine that these confrontations hadn't happened already. The message being conveyed is blatant enough when you have text stating it. It could have been alleviated by having these events occur days or weeks apart, the idea being we're just getting glimpses of what's important to the story being told, and we're bypassing those more mundane events. Secondly, Hannes' appearance at the Jaeger's house. I'm convinced this was handled appropriately as far as coincidences go. The first chapter establishes Hannes is near the gate, while the children are only a short walk away from the house. So him arriving later makes sense. As far as motive goes, he clearly has some sort of relationship to Eren and his father. He also has concerns that Eren will throw his life away with the Survey Corps. The second chapter goes as far as stating that he is in their debt. Comes across less like a stroke of luck and more like just an action that this character would make. I believe if there's anything to detract about this scene, it would be Isayama's artwork, which in the previous chapter had its issues, but I thought the level of importance the scene was given the appropriate amount of attention and detail, though there had been some noticeable bewildering decisions here, especially concerning anatomy. I don't think there's an expectation that the Titans should have perfect human composition. In fact, that could contribute to the monstrosity that they're meant to convey. However, when the townspeople at points are portrayed just as loosely, I can argue this can be distracting enough to pull the reader out of the experience. What exactly is going on with his arm? Hannes walks with the children, constantly apologizing. Mikasa has this odd line, which by this point is an on-running theme. Now, this page could just be an establishing image of where Eren and Mikasa are. Nonetheless, I believe this page really hammers through a point without a single line or text addressing it, almost a redemption for the shoddy artwork earlier. As bad as Eren and Mikasa's situation was, they are only one of thousands impacted by this event, many who probably have their own horrific stories. Well done. We observe 2 soldiers arguing whether they should close the gate for the safety of those inside, or leave it open for those still fleeing. This becomes trivial once a unique Titan manages to completely demolish the gate. The citizens fall further into despair after witnessing its power. Eren starts to recall that average day with his parents and Mikasa, showing some introspection for his behavior during that last conversation with his mother before storming off. He laments his own fragility, resulting in him vowing to eradicate all Titans. This is in character for Eren, though I hope it is acknowledged that he is using his mother's death as justification, which also goes against the life she wished for him to have. The text 850 appears before cutting back 5 years to the future, which has the text 845 from chapter 1 make sense now. This is just petty, but I wish they had written year 845. It's not a big deal, still though, it bothered me. The speaker points out that they had paid the price for their 100 years of dormancy. We are given a better look at the territory. The Titans have broken through Wall Maria. It's clear now how devastating it was, seeing so much of their land be overtaken. The speaker stirs the crowd, telling them that they'll need to be ready to give their lives to protect the remaining walls. It's clarified that these are newly trained recruits he's speaking with. We are given their rankings of the 10 best of class. I don't care much for this form of introduction to characters, as I imagine most readers aren't going to remember the names and faces of these kids. We only see for a couple of frames at most. The only thing of interest is that Mikasa and Eren are in the top 10. We can also see Armin among the crowd, and it could be inferred based on their personalities they ended up with the rankings they did. Eren reiterates his goal to destroy the Titans. Then we have the oddest conceit I've seen, where the story ends, and Isayama might as well be communicating with the reader directly about the lore of his world. In a long text blurb, it's explained that the reason the town exists as a bump along the wall was done for practical and economic purposes. The Titans actively target people, thus consolidating the target around a small point makes it easier to manage their numbers and not spread the soldiers out too thin. It's mentioned that there were political tensions on whether or not to seal the gates to the outside world, and wouldn't you know it, there's a promise to explain the construction of the wall and the situation at the time. Certainly, it would be difficult to maintain this dramatic tone of this chapter and sneak in this exposition, though not impossible. I don't really know why it couldn't be told through the framing of the story. For example, it could have been abridged or alluded to along with the beginning exposition where the speaker mentions the construction of the wall. These points could have been expanded through the next chapters. It's hard to imagine that in 5 years our trio would not bring it up, or perhaps we are taught more about it from an instructor. Ultimately, I believe the chapter captured the anguish and powerlessness of its characters exceedingly well. It's not exceptionally rare storytelling to kill off a parent to get the reader to feel compassion for its characters. This is the reason something like this becomes a trope in the first place, though I believe the nuances in each story is what matters most. For example, the death of a parent here is used to have an uncomfortable front seat to the emotional torture of our lead character. It's also expressed what this loss meant to him. I thought the moment Eren began to stew in his own inadequacies was the highlight. Worth noting, tropes are not bad. They can be used as a foundation for a plot to build on top of, with details unique to that story. These characters are as simple as they were in the first chapter. However, Isayama manages to tell us a lot about them in only a couple of panels. The world is still the star, though, don't get that wrong. What are these special titans? Why didn't the giant one just completely demolish the town or eat anyone? What makes them gravitate towards humans? What are the circumstances of the wall's construction? It's kind of funny how answers can be given, but in exchange, we have more interesting questions. Though it appears Isayama's excitement of expanding the world building is beginning to outpace the story. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.